Hey everyone, welcome back to week 3 of Deep Sea December, where we are making more Pokemon for my fan-made region, the Wentano region. I had a ton of great requests come from you guys as to what types of Pokemon you want to see in week 4. If you still have a suggestion that you haven't submitted, it's not too late. I'll be drawing as many of these submissions as I can get to. To everyone who has submitted, thank you. I'm excited to show you what I've worked up already. Until then, though, let's focus on this week's line of Pokemon. I think I've worked up something pretty special. It's interesting. We have 3 main lines of cephalopod Pokemon that I can think of. Cephalopod means octopus or squid or cuttlefish. Cuttlefish is the other one. Or nautilus is a fourth one. There's a bunch of cephalopods. Anyways, we have stuff like Octillery and Malamar and Graplocked. Though I could be missing one or two. I'm so tired right now. Anyways, they all represent different aspects of octopuses, squids, and cuttlefish pretty well. They do a good job of separating from each other. We have an excellent opportunity to create a deep sea cephalopod Pokemon that has its own unique personality and path from the other 3, though. In the last 15 years or so, the Dumbo octopus has become somewhat infamous for being a real cutie. Lots of squids and some octopus have these flipper type of shapes on the sides of their heads. Cuttlefish have them with the greatest regularity and greatest movement control. These fins serve different purposes on different animals as well, where for some they might be purely ornamental, others might use them to steer or even make small movements. On the Dumbo octopus, they seem to actually function as flippers, at least in some regard. For the first evolution of this line, I want to focus on making a cute little Dumbo octopus with ears or flippers on either side of its body. I imagine that it can use these flippers in conjunction with its tentacles to get around in the deep sea. But that being said, what's going on with these tentacles? Well, one thing that's really strange about the deep oceans is that pressures can get so intense that it becomes nearly impossible to determine which way is up and which way is down. You don't even have to go that deep for this to start happening either, and sadly, many humans in real life have lost their way because they couldn't find an indicator as to which direction they should surface. This Pokemon is by no means nefarious, but it's definitely a trickster. It loves confusing people and Pokemon alike, and it does this by having a head that's technically on the bottom of its body. When swimming at high speeds, the red portion leads as it does this, which has boggled scientists for some time. In my head, this is twofold. It can confuse as to which direction is the bottom or top of the ocean, and it can trick predators into going after the red part instead, as it behaves like a false head. This red portion can be regrown, but the real head cannot. The general theme of this Pokemon should be confusion. It, just like many real deep-sea animals, doesn't make a whole lot of sense upon first viewing. It's only when you bring into context their survival strategy and their environment that the pieces start to fall into place. Meet Octarva, the confusion Pokemon. Octarva spend much of their time flipping upside down and back again as they float along the ocean floor. They will often seek out larger Pokemon and attempt to discombobulate them with the illusion that Octarva is right side up, causing them to change directions and even bump their heads on the ocean floor from time to time. Their pranks sadly led to the deaths of divers and explorers before scientists recorded them and began to warn those swimming in the Wentano oceans. Let's let Octarva evolve, though. I want to make this Pokemon very interesting, very fast. The easiest way to do that? Lie a little bit to you when I was making Octarva. No, to be clear, I didn't lie exactly. Octarva is a deep-sea Dumbo octopus Pokemon. That's just not all it's going to be. You probably noticed it's a fairy type from the background and its Pokedex entry, as well as the Arva suffix in its name. Think of Octarva as a fairy octopus larva that's going to grow into something both beautiful and fierce. But what would you call the fairies of the ocean? I would say that's a mermaid. But notoriously, mermaids have fishtails and not squid heads as their lower halves. So what's a man to do? I'll tell you, it's ignore tradition and embrace whatever the heck I want, at least in this case. The second stage Pokemon is where we start to see the transition from just a baby octopus into a mermaid. We'll get into this more with our third stage, but you're going to notice immediately there's some spines attached to this Pokemon's collar. This collar should be thought of as this Pokemon's arms or appendages. It's completely under its control and uses it as it wants to. And the tentacles are too, the ones on top of its head. but they're typically used to hide this Pokemon's true face or to pull prey closer to the mouth that's up there. You'll also see it's got false eyes that resemble a squid's eyes on the sides of its bodies, and when flipped upside down, it too has a deceiving appearance. It typically does its best to appear as a mermaid rather than show its squid side, but in instances where its life may be endangered, it's known to flip upside down suddenly, revealing a false face and shocking predators. It can then squirt out ink or even attack by elongating the tentacles on its head or appendages on its collar. It's very stretchy. This Pokemon, as well as its baby and adult stages, is really supposed to embody two primary themes: the octopus's ability to transform itself in both color and shape, as well as old stories in which mermaids are deceitful creatures who lure men to their deaths. That's why this Pokemon is a brilliant hunter. By appearing as an innocent mermaid fairy, this Pokemon can get close to potential prey items and strike out with the spines that it's got. This kind of behavior of behaving innocently and then striking unsuspecting Pokemon is what gains it a dark typing. One last thing of note, the squid beak coming out of the top of this Pokemon's head does work, but it's not how this Pokemon feeds. It can use it for that, but this secondary mouth is part of an intimidation scheme. Think of this Pokemon as a killer mermaid first and a medium-sized squid second. Meet Ochiva, the Mersquid Pokemon. Ochiva tend to fall somewhere in the middle of the food chain wherever they live in the Wentano Ocean. Because of this, they have two layers of disguise that they implement, one for being hunted and one for hunting. When hunted, they will flip upside down to reveal the false face of a squid, but while hunting, they maintain the appearance of an innocent young mermaid. I'm sure that by now you may have figured out how the final evolution of this Pokemon will behave. I don't think it's a surprise to learn that this Pokemon works hard to earn its dark typing, but let's talk more physiology first, and then the decisions made to get there, and then we're going to get into lore and myths of mermaids that we're going to use to build this Pokemon up. Octarva confuses people and Pokemon as part of harmless pranks, though they do harm incidentally sometimes. Ochiva, on the other hand, actively works to deceive both as a predator and prey as part of self-preservation. This Pokemon is at the top of its food chain and quite the queen of deception, but it does it a bit more gleefully than its previous evolutions might. Because of that, its shape, language, and features really need to reflect its ability and aims at the same time. First, let's talk colossal and vampire squids. Both of these have spines that line their tentacles, though they serve different purposes. I should clarify, a colossal squid has sharp hooks on the ends of its tentacles, which are not arms, of which it has 8. These 2 tentacles are retracted close to the body and shoot out quickly to grab onto and hook prey, bringing it closer to the mouth where it can then be maneuvered by the arms. This Pokemon has those 2 tentacles, though they're attached to the top of the head and resemble large pigtails or human hair. Vampire squids, which are in fact octopuses and not squids, have rows of spines that line the insides of their tentacles, as well as webbing between the tips of their tentacles. While this could be used in a grabbing and maneuvering prey item kind of a way, they actually have a strange habit of pulling their tentacles all the way up over their heads so that their entire body is covered in a layer of spiny tentacles. Pretty cool and very scary, which is what earned them the nickname of vampire squids by early explorers, though they don't actually drink blood or exsanguinate any kind of prey. Both of these sets of tentacles or arms and their spiny accessories have been placed strategically on this Pokemon in such a way that they aren't the main focus. As deadly as they might be, it's important that when you view this Pokemon at first, it's the outline of a maiden at sea, arms clasped in front of her hourglass silhouette as she moves through the water. This is what many sailors of old saw on long journeys across the Wentano oceans, but it wasn't realized that this was a Pokemon until much, much later. The last thing I'll focus on is that this Pokemon's head doesn't have a mouth. It's a tricky thing for me drawing more humanoid Pokemon. That's why I decided to take the mermaid approach. It lets me blend in an animal and hit 2 birds with 1 stone. But I want this Pokemon to appear as a mermaid and truly be a sea monster. Its mouth is actually covered up by its hands in the artwork, but it's massive. That size helps disguise it, but it also means that she's a real man-eater. Those spines on her arms and tentacles make escape nearly impossible, and her large mouth allows her to take massive chunks out of any size prey. Meet Mercipire, the vampire Mersquid Pokemon. Mercipire were not discovered to be Pokemon until modern times, when submersibles were able to dive to the depths where they live. It is all but confirmed that these dangerous and aggressive Pokemon preyed on innocent sailors who didn't know better and were deceived by their feminine appearance. Even today, they lure unsuspecting Pokemon in close, only to devour them with their giant mouths found on their stomachs. And there you have it, an evil mermaid-squid Pokemon. What do you think? Would Mercipire make your team? And hey, don't forget to join our Discord while you're here. Leave a comment there or on this video if you have an idea for week 4 of Deep Sea December. Links in the description. Until then, happy holidays, and I hope you like what I've made. And I hope that it inspires you to make something of your own.